Dive DPS have some of the highest plague-making capabilities out of any DPS in the entire game of Overwatch. If you could learn how to master one of the 3 pivotal divers, Genji, DOOMFIST, or Tracer, you could pop off and hard carry more than just about any character in the entire game. On top of this, dealing with divers could be a legit nightmare for many of you support and tank players getting doved over and over again. All that being said, I'm going to be breaking down in this video how to pop off with divers and how to counter them, so let's jump right into it, shall we? Now, kicking it off with the first character on the list, we have a DPS that recently got a pretty sizable buff, Genji. Now, speaking about the buff, let's talk about the first tip on Genji, which is the Genji new kill combo. That's right, Genji has a new combo that you should probably start doing instead of the traditional old combo. Right click, dash right click, especially when you're doing a short dash or a dash right at the enemy's feet, is extremely lethal and does quite a bit of damage. The reason in the past that you didn't right click before you dash is because if you right click dash, there was going to be a giant delay before you could right click again. That delay has been greatly decreased, so right click dash right click, especially if the enemy is lower than 50% HP, it will be an easy way to confirm a kill on Genji. Now, kicking it off with the next tip we have for you on Genji is the duality of Genji, and this is a concept that is dated back since the beginning of Overwatch, but I'm definitely going to reiterate here quickly so that you understand what it is, because it's honestly the most important concept out of everything I'm going to talk about here about Genji. The duality of the Genji is the 2 stages, the poke and pressure stage and the engage, pick-oriented style, brawly style of Genji. What I mean here is there'll often be situations where you're just poking from the choke, getting a little bit of reflect, ult, charge, trying to build up that blade, and then there's the brawl style of Genji, which means you're going in, you're trying to confirm a kill, finish off the enemy, and make a play. The thing is, understanding how to transition from the poke and pressure to the brawl stage is the most important thing that you need to understand about Genji. If you just are always trying to brawl and you constantly are getting shut down and killed, that's because you're not doing the poke and pressure right. And if you're always poke and pressuring and you don't make any plays or see any opportunity, maybe there were opportunities on the table that you didn't transition to the brawl stage for. Now, you might be asking, okay, I don't want to feed, I don't see any reason to go to the brawl stage because no one's low, no one is doing any damage to the enemy, and I'm just poking and pressuring the whole time and I'm not making any plays and I'm essentially doing nothing on Genji. That is what Genji's Dragonblade is for. Genji's Dragonblade is something that can force the brawl style of Genji even after you've been playing the poke and pressure stage the whole game. So you can do things like poke and pressure, no plays are made, no opportunity arises, then you force the brawl with a Dragonblade. But if you see an opportunity, someone's low, you could potentially burst down someone with a new Genji combo, then you go in and you go to the brawl stage, maybe you chain one kill into the next, or you simply get that kill, go to the brawl stage, then re-transition back to the poke and pressure stage and business as usual. Now let's talk about the next tip that we have for you on Genji, which is have a plan to get out and don't always rely on your plan working correctly. You can make all kinds of more risky plays if you have a plan to get out right afterwards. Imagine dashing through the enemy team but immediately wall running around natural cover or completely out of their LOS. Having map knowledge about where you can wall climb, understanding where minis and megas are, can definitely have you making a more aggressive plan that you'll still get out safely from. So understanding the ins and outs of every single map is greatly important on Genji. Now, before we talk about some Genji ultimate tips, definitely go check out GameLeap.com if you want to see in-depth Grandmaster VOD reviews over Genji, DOOMFIST, or Tracer. These videos will definitely give you the leg up on your competition, so if you want to climb all the way to GM, do yourself a favor and go check them out. Anyways, moving on to the last and final tips for Genji, we're going to be talking about his ultimate. Now, there are a lot of things that people do really wrong when using Genji's ultimate, and I'm going to break them down here. The most important thing that you need to keep in mind when using your Dragonblade is it's far easier when your teammates are going in. Even if they're not all pushing it aggressively, you want them to take some of the aggro or focus fire from yourself. Having the enemy use ammo, resources, abilities on your teammates make it that much easier for you to get a successful blade off. The next biggest mistake that I see Genjis when they try to Dragonblade is that they don't save any abilities and they don't actually execute the initial part of the blade correctly. Let me explain. Many Genjis will double jump, dash up into the air to get something like a nano. The problem is, if you already jumped pre-blade, you can't jump in the middle of your blade. If you simply are up on the high ground and dash across the sky or up in the air, you'll get another jump mid-blade so that you could potentially dodge many powerful cooldowns. On top of that, a lot of Genjis will be standing at choke and they'll potentially have to use their reflect just to stay alive, and then when they Dragonblade, they don't have the reflect for mid-blade. Being able to deflect mid-blade, animation cancel it with your dash dash is one of the best ways to minimize the potential window of time where you can get punished on Genji. All these things add up to overall more consistent blades, which, as we said before, it's one of the most important aspects about Genji's kit. It's one of the only ways that you can force through the brawl aspect of Genji, the playmaking aspect of Genji, from the poke and pressure side. So getting all these things right is definitely something that you need to do if you want to master Genji. Now, let's talk about some tips and tricks on how to deal with Genji. If you're getting farmed by Genjis in your games, here is what you could do. These are the 4 steps to deal with a Genji. The first thing you need to understand about playing against a Genji, especially as you climb the ranks, is only your first shot is truly safe against the Genji. If you are a Widowmaker and you're shooting at a Genji, if you are in an unknown position, realize that that first shot you take can be a lethal one for the head, but then understand every shot after that is potentially risky, as the Genji can flick and reflect at any time. Many Genjis will pretend they don't know you're there, but they're really trying to bait you in. They get enemy McCrees with stun that way, enemy Anas with their nade that way. Understand that the element of surprise is so important, especially when up against Genji's reflect. Now, moving on to the next tip that we have for you when dealing with Genji, is you want to close the distance on him, especially if you're a diver like Monkey, and use your abilities to chase him when he uses his abilities to disengage. This could be the same way with something like Tracer even, but Monkey is the best example, where you try to get as close as you can to Genji as possible without using your leap. Then the Genji dashes away, and then you leap after him to confirm the kill. Now let's talk about tip number 3 with how to deal with Genji. This is learn how to stun over and under his deflect. This is a really McCree specific tip, and it's very important on McCree, but overall it can be applied to just learning how to duel Genji. Learning about Genji's kit and maybe even playing him a little bit can help you understand the reflect timing so that you could shoot him right after reflect. Understanding how to flash above and below, and what are the big weaknesses in the matchup that you can exploit, because a lot of times I'll go into a matchup and play it incorrectly as Genji, but the enemy doesn't know how to punish me correctly, so I end up getting the kill on them even though I played it poorly. Now let's talk about tip number 4. This one is the sad one for me personally as someone who plays Genji often, but I gotta tell you here because honestly, I'm trying to give you the best tips and tricks on how to stop Genjis and shut them down. Abuse Genji with broken characters that counter Genji hard. Characters like Mora, characters like Mei, even characters like Sim, Brig. There are so many characters that actually just completely destroy Genji. Don't be afraid to whip them out. If your composition is Zen, Ana, Widowmaker, McCree, Diva, Rein, all those characters can just get farmed by Genji. And if you're getting destroyed by a Genji, start swapping up the picks. Maybe swap the Zen to a Brig. Maybe swap the Widowmaker to a Mei. And then all of a sudden, this Genji is getting less and less value, and he's not making any plays. You don't ever have to play fair when up against any of these divers. Play the character that will shut them down, play their counters, and you will guaranteed climb more against these heroes. Now let's talk about the next hero on our list, and we're going to talk about DOOMFIST and give you some tips and tricks on how to pop off with him as well as shut him down. The first thing that you need to understand about DOOMFIST is a concept that I've talked about many times, but I need to reiterate it here because it's so important for you to get right. It's the cycles of DOOMFIST. DOOMFIST really needs to engage and disengage based on his cooldowns. His whole power level, his whole kit, his whole impact is all centered around his abilities. If you use all your abilities and you get even 1 kill, you don't have any abilities to retreat, and then your potential impact level is halted. It stops right there at 1 kill, or maybe not even a kill at all. Here's what you should do. You should use either your punch or your seismic slam to engage the enemy, and then use the other ability, either the punch or seismic slam, to disengage. You can punch in, or you could seismic slam, uppercut, punch out, glide punch out. These are the simple cycles of DOOMFIST, because the thing that you need to understand is you can keep fishing for kills. You go in, try to get a kill, doesn't work, you go out. You go in, you go out, you go in, you go out. As long as DOOMFIST is alive, he could turn team fights, so do not feel like you have to just go in, use all your abilities, and pray that it works out. You never have to do that. You can keep fishing for scenarios where you will 100% get value as long as you stay alive. Now, the next thing that you need to start doing on Doom that I think is actually really underrated is that you can often bait enemies that peek chokes and corners with your punch and kill them instantly, especially if your team is retreating from a losing team fight. Let me give you this example. Let's say your Reinhardt dies and your teammate's backing up past the choke point, and someone is peeking around the corner. You can actually set up scenarios where you potentially kill people as you're retreating because they're trying to push up and stagger you. You just punch them right into the wall. They have no counterplay. They just they peek a corner and they die instantly. And then all of a sudden the fight is even and maybe your team doesn't even have to retreat. This is what I would call a bait with Doomfist, and it really plays into your game sense and understanding what the enemy is trying to do, and then winning the matchup when they can't have any time to react. They're already trying to push up aggressively, and you just shut them down right there. Now let's talk about the third tip we have for you on Doomfist, and this is when you have your ultimate. Understand that all the things that I said about the cycles of Doomfist doesn't necessarily apply when you have your ultimate. What you can do is you can go in and use all your abilities. You go in with Seismic Slam, you uppercut, you punch someone, you use all your ammo, and then you ultimate. You try to get as much value as physically possible before you use your ultimate, and then when you're in your ultimate, you can not only regain information about the potential fight, whether it's winnable, losable, whether you should retreat or engage, and at the same time, you get all your precious cooldowns back online. So you can essentially go in, use all your abilities, and get a kill, animation cancel it with your ult, and potentially get all your cooldowns back, follow it up on the enemy team, and combo it off from there. This is really important on Doomfist because a lot of times you will do the cycles on Doomfist a couple times. Maybe they work, maybe they don't, maybe you get some value, maybe you don't, but eventually you'll build that ultimate where you can really make a hard play, which is using all your abilities, and that will usually win a team fight if you can do it correctly. Now let's talk about the fourth and final tip about Doomfist, and it's listen for cooldowns of enemies. Learn the sounds of enemy cooldowns and really pay attention to when you hear it. If you hear an enemy McCree uses flashbang, all of a sudden you can just go crazy at him aggressively, understanding that he has no way to counter you. You can do this with sleep darts, roadhog hooks. Tracking enemy cooldowns is something that a lot of high-level Doomfists will do, and it's something that if you start to do, you will see tons of free kills and free picks, even against characters that are supposed to counter you. Now let's talk about our big tips on how to deal with a Doomfist if you're a support player or a tank or even another DPS that is getting farmed by Doomfist every single game. Here's the tips that will help you deal with him. The thing that you need to understand about Doomfist is at high levels, Doomfist is actually a team effort to deal with. But unfortunately in the ranked environment, that doesn't really work out. So here's what you need to do if you want to stop the Doomfist. You need to be actively tracking where he is at all time. Is he on the high ground? Is he in the flank? Is he in our backline? Follow where he is and try to gain as much information about where he is as possible. The only way to actively stop a Doomfist multiple fights in a row is by getting preliminary damage into that Doom, especially if you don't have a stun. But even sometimes if you do, you need to be messing up the cycles of Doomfist that we talked about. If the Doomfist is setting up for a cycle, an engage plus a disengage on the high ground, and you already put in a little bit of damage into him, you discord him, you hit him once, or you hit him once as Ana, then all of a sudden he needs to go back to his team, get heal, and he can't engage his cycles anymore. Then you really mess up his cycles, and if he engages onto you after you already took damage, then you actually have a chance to win. But if a Doomfist comes onto you by surprise with his full HP, he's gonna jump all the way up to 300 plus HP because of his shields, and he's probably gonna kill you instantly, and he might even be able to kill the whole team because that element of surprise is so huge for Doom when his time to kill is so fast. So you really need to be tracking him and standing in positions that is hard for him to come onto you by surprise. And moving on, here's the second point that I really need to make, but it's very important, is swap if you're getting farmed. This seems simple, but you'd be surprised how many times I see a Doomfist continuously farming a Zen every single fight, and the Zen wants to challenge him, doesn't change up his playstyle, gets spawn camped, gets murdered, and there's nothing he could really do. It's the same way with any character. If you're playing a character that is getting farmed by Doomfist, you might do better just swapping off into something that hard counters him and prevents him from just doing whatever he wants. Now let's talk about the third tip when dealing with Doomfist. Make Doomfist a priority target in team fights. We talked about before how an alive Doomfist can turn any team fight because of his time to kill and burst damage. If you let a Doomfist get out with even a little bit of health, it can mean a lost team fight later on when the Doom re-engages. A little bit of resources into the Doomfist goes a long way, so as such, you need to shut him down. If he ever is engaging into the enemy team, everyone should be calling and focusing the Doomfist because he is the biggest threat on the table. Now let's talk about the fourth and final tip before we move on to Tracer, talking about how to deal with Doomfist, and that is when you are capping specifically a 2 CP point and you're standing on the point and the enemies are funneling out trying to recontest before you cap the point. You need to be very careful about Doomfist coming out of spawn. Doomfist is one of the best characters at recontesting because he has one of the best potential kits that will allow him to actually flip a team fight. Because something that Doomfist can do is fly out of spawn, insta-kill someone, uppercut and seismic slam and use all of his ammo to kill another person, and then all of a sudden what? you lost the fight that you were supposed to be winning, but you lost it to a Doom flying out of spawn, here's what you should do to stop this from happening. Pay attention to what the enemy is swapping to, first and foremost. Make sure that you're not positioned in a way that is really easy for a Doomfist to potentially punch you, and if you're a healer or someone that's fragile to a Doomfist, maybe not playing on point and playing off the point but still healing your teammates is way better than playing on the point, simply AFKing on the point and trying to group up. A Doomfist flies out, punches you into a pillar or a wall because you're really not paying attention, and then all of a sudden this Doom turns the team fight, or the enemy stalls long enough to win the team fight when you should have won that fight easily. Now let's move on to the next character on our list, and this is Tracer. And this character has some of the highest skill ceiling in the entire game, and if you play Tracer really masterfully, you can carry a lot of games. That being said, let's break down some of the tips and tricks on how to play and pop off with her or shut her down. So the first thing that you need to understand about Tracer is you need to start thinking about your abilities as something that needs to find impact or value. The cornerstone of ability management is trading your resources for actual impact on the table. If you use all your blinks and your recall and you get no kills and you do very little damage, then you really didn't get any value out of Tracer's abilities, and all you're doing is wasting time. Try to make steps so that each and every one of your abilities actually gets solid impact on the table. And this is going to go hand in hand with the next thing that we need to talk about is routing. One big problem with people's ability management is their poor routing. They will often use blinks to move around the map and then double or triple blink at an enemy Zen or any character. Then they have no abilities to actually duel the Zen. They're forced to recall, and then what? They didn't kill the Zen, they wasted all their time and effort, and they didn't get any value. Routing is very important on Tracer. You want to actually get as close as possible to enemies without using any of your resources so that you can actually use your resources and trade them for damage and value and potentially picks on the enemy. Now let's talk about the third tip that we have for you on Tracer, and this is learning the matchups of Tracer versus each and every character. Tracer is a character that if you can start winning matchups against enemy McCrees, Zens, Widows, or any other character, you have the potential to pop off and carry, because you can have a solo duel somewhere isolated on the high ground or off the map. You win that duel, you pick up a mini or a mega, and then you go back to point and you potentially get to get all your cooldowns back and fight again after you already won the duel. Tracer can take a whole bunch of these micro duels and have tons of impact that way. You definitely need to be practicing your tracking and mechanical skill, but more importantly than that, learning what is the win condition when you're up against enemies that you need to duel. How do you win against a McCree? What kind of resources do you need? Do you think you could duel a McCree if you have no recall and only one blink? Most likely not. But if you have all three of your blinks, you can 180 blink, do some damage, run 80 blink, try to bait the flash, crouch spam, and still spam him down if he doesn't have his flashbang. And it's true like this with every character. There are certain ways that you want to play every single matchup. My best suggestion is to go to try out free-for-all, but for you, try to realize that Tracer can win the 1v1 matchup against nearly every squishy in the entire game. And if you can practice what is the win condition and you understand what is the win condition, you can take these duels and you can understand exactly what you need to do to win, start winning them more, and start climbing that SR ladder. Now let's talk about tip number 4 on Tracer, and this is about pulse bomb use. What I would suggest you do is, if you want to get really good at pulse bombs, which I think you should because it's one of the best ways to carry on Tracer, practice in a custom game where you just get unlimited pulse bombs and just practice blinking in, pulse bombing against bots. Speaking of blinking in, many high-level Tracers will use blinks to close the distance and try to secure easy pulses from close range and then recall and blink away. This means that you get more consistency with your pulse bombs, and consistency is what you should be going for when playing Tracer. Now moving on to the next section, we're going to talk about how to deal with Tracer. Sometimes Tracers could be a nightmare to deal with, and here are the tips and tricks to deal with a Tracer. So the first thing that you need to understand is, similar to the Doomfist example, Tracer needs her abilities in order to have effective engages. This means that if you could see her routing around the map and put pressure into her, she might have to use cooldowns simply to navigate, and then she has to wait either extra time, which is good for you and your team, or she has to engage much weaker with less cooldowns, which is very, very good because, like we said before, it's a lot easier to zone her away. She doesn't have that many cooldowns. She might have to retreat back, and she's getting essentially no value. Now let's talk about the second thing that you need to do if you are having trouble with Tracers. You should start learning more about Tracer herself. Learn the recall timer. She goes back 3 seconds. Learn the blink distance. It's 7.5 meters. If you learn these things, you can actually pre-aim where the enemy will end up post blink or post recall, and that can give you much easier shots and it will be a lot easier to hit abilities. You see a lot of really insane high level players do this, but there's no reason that you can't do it too. You just gotta actually try to actively think about doing it and really start practicing it all together. Now let's talk about the third and final tip that I have for you when dealing with the Tracer, and this is learn all the Tracer specific kill combos. Tracer has a specific weakness compared to most characters, and that's that she has only 150 HP. If you're playing something like Ana and the enemy Tracer is sleeping, at the end of the sleep animation you could shoot nade melee, and that's a pretty simple combo to execute. If you're Hanzo, you can do a full charge body shot plus a melee and instantly kill a Tracer. You didn't even have to hit a headshot. There will be specific combos for nearly every character, but just really think about just the Tracer matchup when trying to figure out what your character does, how much damage they do, and if it adds up to that 150, realize that's one of the best ways to deal with Tracers is have a game plan to target her specific weakness. Now, I know I've given you a lot of tips and tricks on how to pop off or shut any of these divers down, but if you want to master them, do me a favor and go check out GameLeap.com. You just have to check it out, but I think that you'll be surprised by how much high quality content is flooded on the site. Anyways, I hope this guide has been extremely helpful for you. If you have any questions or comments, definitely let me know down below. If you have any video ideas that you want me to jump on, I would be happy to. Please let me know. That's all I have for you today. I'm Coach Mills, and until next time,